I'm Brittany, this is Shenwei, and welcome to Gaywatch, where we watch gay things. Today, we continue reading Volume 2 of Guardian. We were on page, and I will say this multiple times, we are on page 221 for Chapter 16. We usually read for about a couple of hours. We take a break around somewhere in the middle. And please no spoilers in the chat, because there's always at least a few people who are experiencing this completely blind, and I myself have never read the book. I have seen the show, but I have not read the book. So, jumping right into it today. Oh, very quickly, I usually do live streams here reading extremely gay things on Tuesdays and Thursdays from 3 p.m. to 5 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. However, this Thursday, so in 2 days, there will be no stream because I have a doctor's appointment that has to happen at the exact same time. So, no stream on Thursday, but usually we get it in on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Now, these fools are doing the most for me right now. All right. He's what? Zhao Yunlan, have you no fear at all? Zhao Yunlan, not really listening, made a vague affirmative noise. Da Qing had seen everything the world had to offer, all there was to see, or so he'd believed. Now, for the first time, he truly understood what it meant for someone to be so deep in lust's grip that they felt brave enough to challenge the sky. So many tales of Emperor's behavior. King Zhou cutting out loyal Bigan's heart for Daji? Potentially? King Yo of Zhou lighting the warning beacons just to coax a smile from his concubine. Emperor Xuanzong missing morning court after a night of bliss. This one comes with a footnote. And of all the ones so far, I'm kind of glad this one comes with a footnote. I want to know. I want to know. Rulers obsessed with their beautiful lovers whose states fell or declined. King Zhou of Shang committed atrocities. Excuse me. King Zhou of Shang committed atrocities for his consort, Daji, and tore out the heart of his uncle, Bigan, for trying to stop him. King Yo, the last Western Zhou ruler, faked an invasion by lighting warning beacons to please his concubine, Baosa. Emperor Xuanzong, whose reign ended the Tang Golden Era, neglected his duties out of lust for his consort, Yang Guifei. So really, this is just a long-standing tradition. All seemed downright reasonable in comparison. Beauty could drive these stupid men to do anything. So many moments from Zhao Yunlan and Shen Laoshe's interactions flashed through Da Qing's mind. Shenwei's knowledge of the netherworld, how familiar he seemed, how he had appeared whenever they dealt with a hallowed artifact, his authority when interrogating Wan Shenyang. Appalled, Da Qing realized that this explained everything. There was no choice but to believe it. Do you know what exactly the soul executing emissary is? He asked. Zhao Yunlan's expression didn't even flicker. That's what I wanted to ask you. Excuse me. He's like married with picket fences and 2.3 kids and like 5 dogs and a couple of Subarus. And now he's asking about his husband's job? Sounds about right. Da Qing was about to lose his mind. I'm an old cat. From back as far as the investiture of the gods. For the most part, I can tell you the ins and outs of everything, from gods and Buddhas to all the creatures that walk the earth. But I can't tell you a thing about the soul executing emissary's origin. Do you understand what that means? This wasn't a surprise to Zhao Yunlan, having seen the portrait Shenwei had painted and read the words, laying eyes on Kunlun for the first time in the shades of the grove. If Shenwei had personally laid eyes on Kunlun, of course he must have been born in truly ancient times. That had been long before Da Qing became self-aware, so how could the cat possibly know the emissary's origin? Just tell me what you do know, Zhao Yunlan said. Dacheng anxiously clawed the ledge. Do you know about Hotu? Zhao Yunlan began outlining what he knew. In the classic of mountains and seas, Hotu was said to be born from Gongong, and was considered a descendant of the Flame Emperor lineage. The Summons of the Soul recorded that Hotu was the god who controlled the netherworld. Okay, but later, legends passed down in the mortal realm often referred to Hotu along with the imperial sky, indicating immense reverence for both. Thanks to that, there are also some legends that claim Hotu is actually Nua. Dacheng nodded. So Zhao Yunlan continued. Back when Gongong overturned Buzhou Mountain, Nua repaired the sky by creating the stones of many hues, which held up the pillars of heaven. Then she turned into Loess. Loess? Separating the yin world from the yang. That was the beginning of the netherworld, and therefore people revered her as Hotu, meaning Queen Earth. Having said all that, Zhao Yunlan still wasn't entirely sure what Hotu had to do with anything. As for the soul-executing emissary, said Dacheng, it's said that he was born thousands of zhang below the Huangquan. But here's the problem. The emissary was born before Bozhou Mountain fell. Buzhou, sorry, I flipped my vowels there. Buzhou Mountain fell. That was before the netherworld and the Huangquan existed. So where did this thousands of zhang below the Huangquan idea come from? In other words, the emissary wasn't born from the netherworld at all. Haven't you noticed how the netherworld fears him? Dacheng said. Zhao Yunlan's cigarette had burned down to almost nothing, but he was oblivious. Dacheng sighed. How did you get tangled up with him? Can't you keep it in your pants? The real tragedy was that Zhao Yunlan had to get it out of his pants. Had yet to get it out of his pants. Ha! See, you'll be having a perfectly normal lore drop about something, and then Zhao Yunlan's horniness will invade in one way or another. It's a little late to be saying that now, Zhao Yunlan said, after which he stood by the window silently, the last rays of the sun giving him an almost endless shadow. He smoked cigarette after cigarette, enveloping himself in so much smoke that it seemed like he was at the misty south heavenly gate. The ground was littered with cigarette butts, and his pockets were empty before he finally motioned for Dacheng to jump onto his arm. The two of them headed out. Where are we going? Asked Dacheng. Oh, hello. Art. Back to Bright Avenue. Zhao Yunlan's tone was frosty. I need to see Chu Shujia and then make an appointment with a Reaper. I won't let anyone else bully those who work for me. They arrived just after the day shift had finished up, but Chu Shujia hadn't arrived yet. Zhao Yunlan set out dried fish and milk for Dacheng, and then went right into the library. He grabbed a pair of protective glasses by the entrance, and had just put them on when he saw Wang Zhang and Sang Zan hastily pulling away from each other in the corner. Carry on, he said. Don't mind me. Wang Zhang scoffed and fled, covering her face. This is the art, actually. Like, does every single piece need to be beautiful? Like, really, no matter what they do. It's just so pretty. Okay, we'll be here all day if we get hung up in the art. Sungzan ran his hands through his hair. He had thick skin and wasn't easily embarrassed. Totally forgot to get rid of my face. He walked over and said, Kunlun again. The glasses made Zhao Yunlan's nose bridge seem a little taller than normal. When he looked up, revealing the sharp lines of his jaw, something about his handsome face seemed colder than usual. There's no point. Someone's already wiped all the useful information. Zhao Yunlan ran a finger along the spines of the books on the shelf, searching. I want any information at all regarding Nua. Nua creating humans, Nua repairing the sky, the battles between Chiyo and the Flame and Yellow Emperors, the battle between Gongong and Juanshu. I want all of it. They may be able to erase one individual entirely, but I refuse to believe they can hide every trace of that sequence of events. Zhao Yunlan looked like an illiterate punk, but his appearance was deceiving. He had an impressive knowledge of ancient texts, letting him quickly skim through a book, and he was familiar with several ancient languages. Now he sat cross-legged on the tall metal ladder and got to work. When he finished with a book, he tossed it down. Sangzan didn't bother him and just waited below, reshelving the books without a word. The only sound in the library was that of pages being turned. But Zhao Yunlan's vision still wasn't back to 100%. When he got tired, it was like there was a film over his eyes. He had to take periodic breaks and talk to Sangzan. Buzhou Mountain is a sacred mountain. Legend says it's the road to the heavens. Rude motorcycle. Zhao. Legend says it's the road to the heavens. Zhao Yunlan gestured as he explained carefully to Sangzan. Historical records show that Gongong and Zhuan Shu. Why do I keep on trying to flip that and reverse it? Battled for power. In the end, Gongong lost, and in a rage he rode the divine dragon and knocked Buzhou Mountain down. Sangzan still had trouble parsing what people said to him. He reacted slowly, then nodded half a beat later. But I don't believe it, Zhao Yunlan said softly. The two emperors, Flame and Yellow, battled Chiyo for more years than anyone could count. They fought until the skies divided and the earth was split, sending sand and rock flying everywhere. But even with that, Buzhou Mountain was fine. Even when Pongu created the sky and earth with his axe, Buzhou Mountain remained unharmed. How could a ride knock it over? Sangzan had learned to ignore all the adjectives and nouns he didn't understand. After a while, in his usual accent, he said, "If this is something that's impossible, but it still happened, then someone made it happen." Cutting off the road to the heavens, Zhao Yunlan tapped a finger against the ancient tome. Who could have done it? Why? Sangzan watched as Zhao Yunlan's gaze slowly deepened. After Buzhou Mountain fell, Nua used huge rocks to plug up the sky. She herself turned into Hotu and her spirit scattered in the netherworld, Zhao Yunlan continued. It was like Nua held up the sky and earth with her bare hands. Earth, mud. His voice got quieter and quieter until he was nearly talking to himself. Then he suddenly said, "Wait, give me the part about Nua creating humans again. Am I pronouncing that correctly? The N-U-W-A has an accent mark over it, and I'm never entirely sure what that accent mark does. I can never keep the accent mark straight." So really quick, if anybody knows, let me know if I'm butchering that or not. Sangzan had just passed him the book when Da Qing came in and addressed Zhao Yunlan. "Lao Chu is here." Zhao Yunlan immediately tucked the book away and descended the tall ladder. He was about to leave when Sangzan suddenly spoke up behind him. At the time, there was no order, right? Everyone wanted more power. Mountain? The road to heaven, you mentioned. If it broke, perhaps someone wanted to end. Unable to find the correct words, he gestured, and Zhao Yunlan immediately understood. Unending battle. Zhao Yunlan's brows rose. A new line of thinking had opened up. At the beginning of chaos, all gods battled endlessly. The Flame and Yellow Emperors defeated Chiyo, forming a new order. But there kept being more and more humans. When Nua breathed life into the first human, a thing called power was also born. Humans had joined in the battles. Then, was striking down Buzhou Mountain and cutting off the road to the heavens an attempt to break the order, end the battle between the gods, and return to the beginning of all creation, when things had been prosperous? Again, Zhao Yunlan thought of his dream. Who had been talking to him? Chu Shuzhe had arrived, but not alone. He had a tail. Go Chengcheng, dressed like a cotton ball. Go Chengcheng had 2 scarves wrapped around his neck, covering half his face. He had packaged himself into a ninja turtle. No! After Chu Shuzhe had vanished into thin air, Go Chengcheng had no choice but to head home. But before he even got into a taxi, he changed his mind. He felt bad for letting Da Qing down on the first day of the Lunar New Year, so he'd returned to that little alleyway to search for Chu Shuzhe, gritting his teeth and asking for information from everyone he encountered. After he'd searched in the biting cold for over half an hour, a kind-hearted auntie from the neighborhood committee had noticed him and his bright red nose and had brought him right to Chushu-jo's door. But once she left him there, Go-Chang-Chung didn't dare knock or leave. It wasn't until Chushu-jo received the soul-guarding order's call and stepped out to go to Forbright Avenue that he found this popsicle of a co-worker outside his door. What could Chushu-jo do but bring him along? That was pretty much your only option. The atmosphere in the office was tense. Chushu-jo sat in front of the desk, fidgeting a bit with Zhao Yunlan's lighter. His eyes stayed fixed on the desk and his expression was somber. Off to the side, Da-Ching paced in equal silence. The only sound in the entire criminal investigation unit was Go-Chang-Chung sniffling. Chushu-jo didn't look up until Zhao Yunlan hurried out from the wall, carrying a book. "Why did you call me here?" Zhao Yunlan sat across from him, took in his expression, and asked a straightforward question. "Do you intend to leave?" When Chushu-jo didn't say anything, Zhao Yunlan icily added, "Take your hand out of your pocket. Don't act like I can't smell that thing's stench." Chushu-jo's mouth curled in a fake smile. He pulled his hand out to reveal a tiny bone in his palm, illuminated with a dim blue light. The bone was hollow, with 4 holes. A bone flute, which could be used to control corpses and spirits of the dead. Wei Wuxian just entered the chat. Such profound disrespect for the dead meant that bone flutes had been considered sorcery since ancient times. Wei Wuxian really has entered the chat. Go-Chang-Chung sneezed. Chushu just side-eyed him and slowly said, "I think you should find someone to take the poor kid home first. Xiao go with Da-Ching to the kitchen. Make yourself a bowl of banlongan. Banlongan. Ooh, I don't know how. My mouth didn't know that one yet." Once Go-Chang-Chung and Da-Ching had left the room, Zhao Yunlan's expression darkened. Slapping the table, he demanded, "What do you think you're doing, bringing that reeking thing? Do you want to lie back down in the mud and go back to being a shackled corpse king? Do you want to spend the rest of your days in hiding?" Chushu-jo held his head up high. 300 years ago, I was insolent and didn't understand the rules. I committed a crime and agreed that I should bear the consequences. I accepted these 300 years. If I thought I was wronged, what could some puny reapers have done to me? I gave them an inch and now they're fucking taking a mile. Postponing the removal of merit shackles is standard practice. Other people can bear it, so why can't you? Because I am not other people. Zhao Yunlan, don't forget, I put the merit shackles of my own will. I was giving them face. That doesn't mean I think I was wrong. You have the gall to tell me the stupid shit you did wasn't wrong? That's right. I'm not afraid to say it. So what? I don't regret it. If I had to do it all over again, I'd still skin the little brat and tear out his tendons and just sit in jail for another 300 years. What's this shit about merits and sins, adults and children? To me, there are 2 types of people. Those I can kill and those I can't. If they're forcing me like this, if my crimes are so unforgivable that 300 years aren't enough to atone, then why shouldn't I commit the crimes I've been charged for? If I rack up a few more offenses, this transaction would be worth it. From now on, everyone had better keep an eye on their kids or the bone flute might scatter their souls, never to return. They're playing a real fine line of ambiguity here. He hadn't quite gotten the final word out when Zhao Yunlan slapped him square in the face, fast and precise. The sharp sound filled the room as Chushu-jo's head snapped to the side. Da-Ching and Go-Chang-Chung had both come back just in time to witness this. Da-Ching yowled, tail bristling. He was sure they were about to fight. At that moment, a gray mist seeped in through the window. You know, like you do. It bumped Zhao Yunlan's shoulder and rolled into his arms, where it turned into a letter. Looking down, Zhao Yunlan saw a hurried note from Shen Wei. "The Reaper is already on their way. No matter what they want you to do, under no circumstances should you agree. Wait for me to come home. Wei." Home? Home. Okay. Zhao Yunlan showed no outward reaction, but the ice in his expression thawed ever so slightly. Chushu-jo glanced at him and stood to leave. 3 soul-guarding orders immediately blazed from Zhao Yunlan's hand, spraying sparks everywhere. They struck Chushu-jo's back as a ball of flame, forcing him back into the chair, binding him in place. Though he was angry enough to spit blood, Chu Shuja still had a contract with the Soul Guarding Order. Even if he had all the power in the world, he still had to answer to it. Zhao Yunlan took a recording pen from a drawer and pressed play. Chu Shuja's last words filled the room again. From now on, everyone had better keep an eye on their kids, or the bone flute might scatter their souls, never to return. In the recording, his voice sounded impossibly cold. Just listening could make someone break out in goosebumps. Listen to yourself, Zhao Yunlan said. Does that sound like something a human being would say? Chu Shuja's eyes flashed, but he looked away stubbornly. I'm not human to begin with. In a truly pathetic whimper, Go Changcheng said, Chuga, don't say things you don't mean just because you're angry. When Chu Shuja gave him a piercing look, Go Changcheng carefully shifted closer and kept sniveling. I don't believe you meant that. I didn't really understand, but Chuga is a good person. You wouldn't do something bad for no reason. Zhao Yunlan leaned back heavily in his chair, rapped his lighter against the desk twice, and then lit a cigarette. Brimming with impatience, he said, Do you even understand the concept of finding the crux of the matter before striking? All you do is lash out. The kid has more maturity than you. I'm embarrassed for you. Chu Shuja gave him a ferocious glare. What are you looking at? Aren't you embarrassed at all? Anyway, I don't have time for this right now. Shogo, wheel him into my office, lock the door, and keep an eye on him. There's a side room in there with a single bed. If you're tired, you can lie down. Kind as always, Go Changcheng immediately asked, What about Chuga? Him? Zhao Yunlan's gaze swept over Chu Shuja. Just let him sit there. He might as well do some serious meditation and wake the hell up. He picked up his teacup, swirling the cold dregs. Still furious, he added, I really want to throw this in your face. Fuck off. Go Changcheng obediently fucked off, pushing Chu Shuja in the rolling chair out of the room. Zhao Yunlan propped his long legs up on the table, book against his knees, and started flipping through it. The legends regarding Nua were fragmented and disjointed. This particular book, Record of Ancient Secrets, had a chapter specifically dedicated to Nua of the Feng family. Neither the author nor the original publication info was specified, but it had most likely been written by some Taoist cultivator after the Song dynasty. Thank you, Blue Turnips, for explaining. I think it's somewhere between Nua, and whoo, that second one is not good for me. You would think. It began by citing imperial readings of the Taiping era. Footnote. That is a massive encyclopedia compiled by a team of scholars during the Song dynasty. It began by citing imperial readings of the Taiping era on its record of Nua's creation of humans. As it is told, when the earth and sky were separated, humans did not yet exist. Nua forced humans out of the... Nua formed humans out of the Loess. That's the other one that I need to look up. Loess. But because it was too much work, she dipped a rope in the mud and flicked it, and humans were formed out of the flung specks of mud. These days, I'm inclined to agree. In a side note, the author went on to add, humans have 5 features on the face, created in Sovereign Wa's own likeness, and are able to speak. Born from the mud, the heavenly wind ignited their 3 fires, and the turbid soil gave rise to their 3 worms. That has a footnote. According to some Taoist texts, the 3 worms are the sources of greed, wrath, and delusion. Gotcha. We, probably know them. That's a similar concept to just vices and virtues. Not to be extinguished until death. They are intelligent but unclean. From infancy to old age, their lives are as fleeting as the sun moving across the sky. Out of pity for them, Sovereign Wa conceived of marriage and became a matchmaker, allowing them to live on through hundreds of generations. Zhao Yunlan found a pen and heavily underlined, the heavenly wind ignited their 3 fires, and the turbid soil gave rise to their 3 worms. Then he continued flipping until he reached the part lifted from the woohoo, from the Huainanja? Huainanza. Huainanza. About mending the sky. In the old days, the 4 pillars that held up the sky came to ruin, and the 9 lands split apart. They could no longer cover, and the earth could no longer contain. The fire was wild and inextinguishable, and the water was an ocean, vast and unstoppable. Fierce beasts feasted upon good humans. Ferocious birds carried off the weak and the old. Nua used the stones of many hues to mend the sky, cut off the giant turtle's legs to use as the 4 pillars of heaven, slaughtered the black dragon to save the land of G, and collected reed ash to soak up the flood. Thus was the sky repaired, and the 4 pillars stood once again. The flood waters receded, and the land of Ju was saved. The evil beasts died, and the good humans could live. Note: out of gratitude to the old turtle for giving its legs, Sovereign Wa gifted it a brocade robe to serve as its fin. Since that time, the 4 pillars have guarded the 4 corners, and the sky has tilted toward the northwest. Kunlun spoke, saying, "Stone that is aged but not yet old, water that is frozen but not yet cold, body that is dead but not yet born, soul that is melted but not yet burned." And thus were the pillars sealed. Why does that sound vaguely familiar? I feel like we've at the very least heard a poem of a similar cadence and approach. That's gonna bug me now. These impossibilities would be sealed in the place beyond all reach and named the 4 hallowed artifacts. So long as the sky does not fall and the earth does not sink, the 4 hallowed artifacts will not resurface, and peace will reign beneath the sky. As he read, Zhao Yunlan smoothed a hand over Daching's fur every now and then. It says here that human 6 senses are tainted due to the poor quality of the mud they were made from. At the end, Nua used the old turtle's legs to hold up the sky and mend it, and Kunlun sealed the 4 pillars with some words. I'm guessing the Kunlun here is probably Kunlun Jun. Also, I've come across these words before. Ha! Yeah, thank you. Aha! At the all! Thank you, Epic. Where? Asked Ching. At the base of the mountain river all, Zhao Yunlan said. If the impossibilities are the 4 hallowed artifacts, then this means that once someone has acquired them and achieved the impossible, they'll reach the base of the 4 pillars. I'm going to read that again just so it can sink better into my brain. If the impossibilities are the 4 hallowed artifacts, then this means that once someone has acquired them and achieved the impossible, they'll reach the base of the 4 pillars. Daching circled around his hand and mumbled, "What is all this? It's making me dizzy." Zhao Yunlan ignored him. He seemed to be talking to himself, getting his thoughts in order. First they talked about using the stones of many hues to repair the sky. Symmetrically speaking, after repairing the sky, the next step should be to hold down the earth, which was likely what those 4 pillars were for. This earth they're referring to is presumably the earth from the time humanity was created, rather than meaning the Hotu that Nua turned into. That makes sense. No wonder Ghostface is so desperate for the 4 hallowed artifacts. Once he has them, he can find the way to destroy the 4 pillars. The fragrance of dried fish still lingered on Zhao Yunlan's fingers from when he touched some earlier. Daching sniffed at them and asked, "Who is this Ghostface you guys keep talking about?" Zhao Yunlan quickly summarized what had happened with the mountain river all, and then his face went a little solemn. Ghostface wears a mask, but I'm pretty sure I know what he looks like underneath. Is it possible? My guess is he looks a lot like Shen Wei, Zhao Yunlan said. Shen Wei thinks too much. He's kind to everyone but himself. I don't know why he hates himself so much, but I'm really worried that he'll... Daching looked up. What? Zhao Yunlan glanced down and met the black cat's eyes, then suddenly took his legs off the desk and murmured, "Someone's here." No sooner had he said that than they heard the distant sound of the woodblock. As it approached, the chill and humidity in the air deepened. A bitter wind rattled the windows in their frames. Zhao Yunlan took a small handful of incense from a drawer, lit the sticks, and stuck them into a flower pot. Next, he took out a ceramic pot and a stack of spirit money, lit the spirit money, and dropped it inside. As the smoke rose, he put away his book and poured himself some hot tea. This reaper had clearly learned from the last one's mistakes. They stood a short distance from the door and announced loudly, "This uninvited guest from the netherworld asks to see the guardian." Will the guardian honor us with an audience? Zhao Yunlun lightened his expression. Please come in. The door to the criminal investigation unit creaked open, and their guest could immediately smell the spirit money and incense smoke filling the room. Money, as they say, can make even a ghost willingly push a grinding stone, and it worked its magic now. The newcomer's face relaxed into a smile. He bowed before saying, "The guardian shows too much courtesy." For just a moment, Zhao Yunlun went very still when he saw who it was. He stood and said with some surprise, "What kind of wind blew my lord magistrate here?" The magistrate was his usual smiling, easygoing self. He seemed less like a reaper and more like the god of marriage, Yue Lao, who distributed wealth, offered well wishes, and brought people together. After entering, the magistrate exchanged casual pleasantries with Zhao Yunlun, and then the two were sitting across from each other, each with his own agenda. Da Qing jumped into Zhao Yunlan's arms, tail twining around his wrist in absolute silence. Deep green eyes locked grimly onto the magistrate, signaling the cat's readiness to protect his master. The magistrate spent some time sighing pointedly, wanting Zhao Yunlan to be the one to start the conversation, but Zhao Yunlan showed no sign of taking the hint. He just sipped his tea, seemingly oblivious. Eventually, the magistrate gave in. This humble old man would never disturb the guardian in the middle of the night if it weren't important. I've come to beg the guardian's aid, for the sake of the world and all who live in it. No, please, none of that. Zhao Yunlan waved his hand hurriedly. There's no need for such flattery. I'm an ordinary mortal citizen who happens to know a few tricks. I'm grateful to be thought of so highly, but I don't dare consider myself anyone of importance. I barely know how to react to your kind words. But of course, if there's anything at all I can help with, just say the word. If it's within my ability to help, I'll do my best. I'm sure the guardian must have noticed the Crow tribe's warning tonight, the magistrate began. Zhao Yunlan's face was the very picture of confusion. No, I was at my mother's all afternoon watching a rerun of the New Year's Gala. I honestly wasn't paying attention. The magistrate didn't know how to respond. What's up with the crows? Zhao Yunlan prompted. The magistrate was perfectly aware that Zhao Yunlan was playing dumb. Coming to deal personally with the guardian had in no way been his own idea. For one thing, the mountain god's soul was sealed within the guardian, and the magistrate neither wanted nor dared to offend such a great god. It's like one of those things that it's very John Mulaney. It's very, we know, but hey, like, we know that, Kunlun must be, obviously, Zhao, or within Zhao, or what have you, but then somebody just, mentions it casually in their inner monologue, and for some reason that fucks you up. For another thing, the Guardian was audacious, slippery, and sneaky, and had only ever mastered 3 talents: shamelessness, leading people in circles, and evasion, any of which was more than enough to keep anyone busy for a while. Red to filth. Crows always report the bad, never the good. They've always been a bad omen. The magistrate's face was bleak. We've received word that black clouds have risen in the northwest. Someone with no fear of being struck down by lightning has set up a giant array on the peak of Kunlun Mountain, with the intent of extracting a corporeal soul from every living being. All living things? Zhao Yunlan exclaimed. The global population is exploding. Is this person strong enough to lift it all? The magistrate was once again speechless. Zhao Yunlan chuckled. I'm a mortal without much knowledge of the world. If you wish for me to do something, you'll have to explain it to me first. With another sigh, the magistrate pulled a wanted notice from his sleeve. Zhao Yunlan glanced at it and saw someone familiar. Ghostface. Feigning ignorance, he asked, "Who's this?" It's a long story. This is a demon king born from the filthiest of places. He is also known as the Chaos King of the Gui. In the era of the Great Chaos, when gods and demons were at war, he was sealed thousands of junk beneath the Huangquan by Nua herself. After all these years, Nua's seal has begun to loosen, and he managed to escape. The Guardian is a smart man. I won't beat around the bush. The truth is, most of his power is still trapped by Nua's seal. If we work together, we still have a chance, but were he ever to fully escape... Zhao Yunlan listened to this half-fake bullshit and pretended not to understand where the magistrate was trying to lead him. An evil being sealed by Nua. That must be different from the evil beings we ordinarily discuss then. Which is more powerful? The magistrate held his tongue. Displaying keen interest, Zhao Yunlan continued, and whatever does he want with all those souls? The magistrate finally caught his breath. His goal is to force the merit brush to reappear. Every living person has a corporeal soul connected to the merit brush. Every merit and every sin, past and present, is recorded on this soul, merits in red and sins in black. If this individual manages to draw out these corporeal souls and collect them at the peak of Kunlun Mountain, the merit brush will appear. You mustn't allow him to get the merit brush or else. Oh, I know about the merit brush, Zhao Yunlan interrupted. Just recently, a little Yao from the Crow tribe used what I thought was the merit brush to lure me in. He even injured my eyes. I still have double vision from that, so you, my lord, look about twice as wide as you were. And now you're saying the merit brush he spoke of was fake and someone was just trying to start shit with me? The magistrate looked up and met Zhao Yunlan's taunting gaze. A whole slew of grievances flooded his mind. It had been the magistrate himself who decided to go to extreme measures to wake Kunlun Jun's spirit, which was sealed within Zhao Yunlan. He had instructed his subordinates to force open Zhao Yunlan's heavenly eye by any means necessary, and left them to figure it out. Unfortunately, some useless underling had gone and asked the Crow tribe for help. The carrion-feeding Crow tribe had always answered to the netherworld. Having a crow carry out the plan was the same as hanging a neon sign announcing who was actually responsible. Who had been foolish enough to come up with that idea? The 4 hallowed artifacts have been adrift in the mortal realm for so many years, Zhao Yunlan said. Those are objects of such immense power, and yet until now the netherworld paid no attention to them. You never bothered to look for them or tried to take them back, but now that shit's going down, you're telling me it's serious? It sounds to me like you're trying to close the barn door after the horse is already making a break for it. That's not very reasonable of you, is it? The magistrate forced a sorry excuse for a smile. That is true. We didn't think things through. Think things through? Zhao Yunlan arched a brow. Why do I feel like it's because you guys have something to fall back on? The magistrate felt as though he were sitting on a carpet of needles. Zhao Yunlan rapped his knuckles against the desk. My lord, you and I have worked together for many years. Let's speak plainly. What do you want me to do? The magistrate put his hands together in a small bow. Put his hands together in a small bow. Sorry, I was like bow or bow, but obviously. This lowly one humbly asks the guardian to lead us up Kunlun and destroy the soul summoning array. Zhao Yunlan's expression was mild. How is that supposed to work? I'm a recluse, not a backpacker. I've never even been to Shangshan Park, despite it being right outside the city, and I certainly don't know which way the entrance to Kunlun faces. Why is my lord asking me to lead the way? This answer, at least, the magistrate had been able to prepare in advance. He quickly replied, the guardian may be unaware that the true soul-guarding order is a piece of wood from the great divine tree on Kunlun Mountain. The tree was planted by Pangu. It is as old as the earth and sky. The mountain's peak has always been forbidden as a place of the gods. The object is the only thing that can grant access. Oh, so you're saying I'm the only one who has a travel pass to Kunlun Mountain? That's correct. Zhao Yunlan reached out and tapped the face on the wanted notice. Okay, then how did this, what do you call him, Demon King? How'd he get up here? Does he have secret VIP access? Is he Pangu's brother-in-law? We mustn't blaspheme a god like that. The magistrate's voice was tinged with fear. To be honest, this evil being was born below the Huangquan, next to the ancient merit tree. The ancient merit tree was born from the same source as the sacred tree atop Kunlun Mountain, and has a bit of a connection to Kunlun. So, the implications. A hint of a smile seemed to take shape on Zhao Yunlan's lips. So does making an array on the peak of Kunlun Mountain to call forth the merit brush also have something to do with that tree? The magistrate, unsure of where Zhao Yunlan was taking this, didn't dare answer carelessly. Beneath the Huangquan, huh? Zhao Yunlan sighed. Why do I have the feeling that that's very close to the soul-executing emissary's manor? The magistrate's eyes flickered. Making a show of hesitance, he said, One could say that. Oh, I see. Zhao Yunlan's smile deepened, but his eyes were like shards of ice. So the magistrate is trying to imply that the emissary and this evil being have some sort of deep connection. The magistrate was flummoxed. Was the guardian really so dense, or was he putting on an act and saying the quiet part aloud? Unsure, he scrutinized Zhao Yunlan's expression. The netherworld had left the black book with him. Was he or was he not aware that Shen Wei and the emissary were one and the same? A reaper had recently reported that even blindness wasn't enough to stop the guardian from welcoming someone to his bed. Surely that must indicate that he had no contact with the emissary. Otherwise, how could the emissary possibly tolerate... ... The magistrate stroked his beard and hid behind a smile. How could this lowly one speak of a high immortal behind his back? The guardian is teasing me. Zhao Yunlan rummaged in his pockets. You want to borrow the soul guarding order, right? Hold on, I'll find it for you. The magistrate quickly waved for him to stop. No. How could we touch the soul guarding order that came from the sacred tree? The only option is to trouble the guardian to make the journey to Kunlun with us. Zhao Yunlan paused and looked at him. It was impossible to know what the guardian's intentions were. His eyes were dark, bright, and unspeakably sharp. The magistrate gritted his teeth and met Zhao Yunlan's gaze, ruining the thankless job he'd taken on. Unhurriedly, Zhao Yunlan asked, Oh, so you guys are afraid to take the soul guarding order, but not afraid to let me, a mortal, be the guardian? I may be a world-class bullshitter, but I don't have any real abilities, and not that many brain cells either. See, I'm easily bewitched. The magistrate smiled politely. No. Zhao Yunlan suddenly leaned forward and asked, It couldn't be that my ancestors also had something to do with Kunlun, could it? The magistrate wailed silently, but Zhao Yunlan was far from finished with him. Look, I haven't managed to catch a break in half a year. First it was the reincarnation dial, then the mountain river all. And now there's the merit brush. If another one shows up, they can form the 4 winds in the Mahjong set, north, south, east, and west. Where do the 4 hallowed artifacts even come from? It looks like the merit brush has something to do with Kunlun, and apparently the reincarnation dial's base was made from the tree life rock. I hear that when Nuwa created humans, every time she flicked a human into existence, a grain of sand fell. Those grains eventually became a rock that recorded the human's past, present, and future lives. After the netherworld came to be, that rock stayed next to the Huangquan and was later named the Three Life Rock. That links the reincarnation dial to Sovereign Nuwa. And then there's the mountain river All. The great black tortoise's element is water, so does the All have some connection to Fushi of the Feng family? The magistrate wiped sweat from his brow. Now black clouds have disturbed even the 33rd heaven, and surely the netherworld isn't attempting to handle such a huge disturbance alone, yes? Who have you teamed up with? The Yao? Cultivation masters from all over? And I'm sure the emissary wouldn't refuse help. No Reaper is ever going to visit this man ever again. They will send him a note. They will never. Woo! Zhao Yunlan studied the magistrate's face. With such great powers assembling, what do you need me for? I don't know anyone other than the emissary. Surely my lord isn't specially asking me to lead the way just so that... He paused and chuckled lightly. The magistrate's heart was in his throat. So that I can greet the Lord Emissary and have a little chit-chat? For a second, petrified, the magistrate thought the man had seen right through him. All smiles, Zhao Yunlan said, My Lord Magistrate, this is exactly how my mother used to go about tricking me into blind dates. What, are you planning on setting me up with the soul-executing emissary? He thinks he's funny. A hostile sound came from Da Qing's throat. It wasn't remotely like a house cat's meow. It much more closely resembled the roar of a tiger or panther. He stood up on Zhao Yunlan's lap, the bell at his neck swinging as he flashed his sharp claws. Clearly frightened, the magistrate shrank back in his chair. The guardian's little joke has perhaps gone a bit far. Zhao Yunlan casually leaned back in his own chair. It's the Lunar New Year. I'm just a powerless mortal. What if something happens to me after I get sucked into something so dangerous? We guarantee the guardian's safety, of course. Zhao Yunlan snorted. You guys can't even get into a mountain. What are you guaranteeing my safety with? Well, I want to bring my own people, Zhao Yunlan said. Not having expected Zhao Yunlan's cooperation, the magistrate froze, but the look that crossed Zhao Yunlan's face next made his teeth ache. The thing is, though, Zhao Yunlan continued, I don't have enough people. Honestly, most of my staff are low-level minions. They're not up for more than running errands. The only really useful personnel are a little snake Yao who can't even transform properly, a tiny cat that's barely a foot long, a clueless intern, and a terminally online selfie addict. The magistrate had an inkling of where this was headed. I finally managed to get a corpse king with some useful skills, but Zhao Yunlan sighed. It was an olive branch, and the magistrate immediately took it. No need to worry on that front. The Corpse King's merit shackles are due to be removed as soon as our side gets through the necessary paperwork. Since the Guardian brought it up, I'll authorize it and have his shackles taken off. Our side will deal with the red tape later. So that's why, Zhao Yunlan exclaimed, only half genuine. Here I thought he'd failed to work off his sins and had gone behind my back to misbehave again. Look, he's right in the next room. I locked him up there to reflect on things. It's all a misunderstanding, the magistrate began. Of course it's a misunderstanding, said Zhao Yunlan. You guys should really streamline your processes. You're so inefficient sometimes that anyone who didn't know better would assume you were deliberately delaying things. This probably says a lot about me, but this might be one of my favorite sequences in the entire trilogy. The magistrate simply had nothing to say. Zhao Yunlan picked up the desk phone and called HR. Wang Zheng, it's me. You saw my message just now, right? Mm-hmm. Okay, print a copy and bring it up to me so our guest here can take a look. Wang Zheng was very competent. In short order, she came floating in with a long list of names. A group of ghosts followed her, all peering through the crack in the door. Zhao Yunlan pushed the list of names across the desk to the magistrate. There sure have been a lot of unjust cases over the last few years, some paperwork delays and some sentences that have just been unreasonably harsh. But today is as good a day as any to deal with them, since you're here and all. Let's seize the opportunity and take care of them right now. And one more thing, when the merit shackles were put on Chushu Judd, did some of his old belongings end up in your custody? The magistrate was silent. Well? Having finally seen firsthand just how difficult Zhao Yunlan could be, the magistrate squeezed out an answer through clenched teeth. We will, of course, return those. Zhao Yunlan was unsatisfied. How soon will that be? Now you're in a rush to leave, but you need to at least give us some time to pack our bags. By this point, the magistrate wanted to never see Zhao Yunlan's face again. Before daybreak, he rolled up the list of names and made a hasty exit. Zhao Yunlan smiled and lit a cigarette with the embers from the burning spirit money. Da Qing glanced up at him. Didn't the emissary say not to agree? Why are you reading my mail? Zhao Yunlan rolled his eyes at the cat, then got serious. I have to go. Under Shen Wei's gentle, polite appearance, he was incredibly stubborn and uncompromising. He was an ancient god. Why was he allowing the netherworld to suspect and plot against him like this? To Zhao Yunlan, it almost seemed like he was protecting something, carrying out some sort of duty that only he knew about. But Zhao Yunlan didn't say anything else. He just ruffled the fur on Da Qing's head, then evaded the resulting swipe of paws with the ease of experience. I want the merit brush, he said. I'm going to bring it back as a betrothal gift. Da Qing's fur bristled. Don't speak nonsense. Zhao Yunlan shut up, perhaps realizing that wasn't something he was capable of. Da Qing jumped onto his shoulder. What about Chu Shujia? Who cares? He actually dared challenge me. He can fucking drop dead for all I care. Don't bother me about him until his body is finally cold. End of chapter! What? Oh, my own chair. Oh! This fucking man. We're on page 247 for chapter 17. It is almost precisely 4 on the dot. So we're going to take our break now. Where the heck did my... Okay, in all of my gesturing, I totally lost my bookmark there for a second. So that's where we'll be picking back up. We'll be back in just a few minutes. This is your cue to stand up, walk around, grab a snack, pet a cat, cuddle with something, a person, maybe, if they're in your house and, consenting and all that jazz. And when we get back, we will pick up on chapter 17. I'm just going to walk off the ridiculousness of this man, so it might be a second. Hello again. We are on page 247 for chapter 17, picking right back up where we left off. And in case you're just joining us, I usually have streams Tuesdays and Thursdays at 3 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time, but not tomorrow, 2 days from now, this Thursday, we are not having one. We are not having another live stream until next week because I have a doctor's appointment. So today, as normal, but this Thursday, we are skipping. Which means we shouldn't be finishing this volume until next Tuesday, actually. I think after this stream, we'll be in a nice, really, cushy, relaxed position to finish the volume next Tuesday. So, during the magistrate's visit, Go Cheng-chung had been taking care of Chu Shujie. Unable to release him from the soul guarding order, all Go Cheng-chung could do was tuck a throw blanket over him and put earphones on him so that he could watch movies and not be too bored. For a while, Go Cheng Chung sat and watched movies too, but eventually he fell asleep. He didn't wake until morning when Zhao Yunlan called. With a start, he realized that Chu Shuzhe was standing up, and the blanket was covering him now. What? Sorry, we're take two on that one. Hang on. Hang on. For a while, Go Cheng Chung sat and watched movies too, but eventually he fell asleep. He didn't wake until morning when Zhao Yunlan called. With a start, he realized that Chu Shuzhe was standing up, and the blanket was covering him now. I just thought that bared repeating. Chu Shuzhe stood at the window, his expression serious as he gazed out at the pitch-black sky. It was late enough that the streetlights' timers had already automatically shut the lights off, and yet it was still dark outside. On the other end of the phone, Zhao Yunlan said, "You're about to have a guest there. Keep an eye on your Chuga and tell him to remain calm. It's not time to burn bridges yet, but stay confident. There's no need to be overly polite to them, understand?" Go Cheng Chung didn't really follow. "Director Zhao, where are you?" "Out taking care of some stuff." Zhao Yunlan's signal didn't seem to be very good. The line was crackling with static. "Don't go running off anywhere. Remember to call your family and tell them you're safe. Stay with Chu Shuzhe." Go Cheng Chung had just hung up when he heard the hair-raising sound of the woodblock. His head snapped around as someone knocked lightly on Zhao Yunlan's office door. Chu Shuzhe turned and calmly said, "Come in." The locked door swung open with a creak, admitting a papier-mâché person in a tall hat. They were carrying a huge package, which they very politely set down in front of Chu Shuzhe. Next, they clasped their hands together, muttering under their breath. Chu Shuzhe's appearance immediately began to change. Tattooed words became visible on his face, and heavy shackles suddenly appeared around his wrists and neck. However, no sooner had those things appeared than they fell to the floor, text and shackles rolling into a small ball that the paper person took possession of. Go Cheng Chung's mouth hung open in shock. The paper person bowed at him. Go Cheng Chung hastily tried to return the gesture, only to accidentally bonk his head into Zhao Yunlan's monitor. Chu Shuzhe opened the package. Most of its contents were made of bone that glowed with a cold, ominous light. They were all things he hadn't seen in 300 years. "Where's our guardian?" Chu Shuzhe demanded. But the Reaper didn't dare speak. Giving nothing away, they shook their head, bowed at the pair of them, and hurried off as if they couldn't leave fast enough. By that point, the soul-executing emissary had arrived at the foot of Kunlun Mountain. There was a scene break between one at they couldn't leave fast enough. Scene break. And now we're at, alright. Sorry, I got a little too excited. I just jumped that little gap there. By that point, the soul-executing emissary had arrived at the foot of Kunlun Mountain. The air was thin and cold, carrying within it a desolate weight reminiscent of ancient times. Dawn had come, but the ink-black curtains of the night had no intentions of being drawn. Excuse me? Dawn had come, but the ink-black curtains of the night had no intentions of being drawn. I'm looking at you, priest. That was rude. Uncalled for. As the wind blew, it sounded like weeping. The emissary couldn't help touching the soul-severing blade at his waist. At the sound of footsteps behind him, he spoke mildly without turning to look. "If everyone is here, let us proceed." "Wait," said a familiar voice. "Not everyone's here yet. I was worried about flight delays, so I left a little early." Hearing that, the emissary whipped around and found himself looking at Zhao Yunlan. He was dressed in hiking gear from head to toe, with a black cat trailing close behind, and carrying a cup of coffee and a burger, which he bit into as he spoke. With a wave, he said, "Have you eaten, my lord? I still have a hash brown." If there is ever a day when I am not entirely head over heels for disasters like Zhao Yunlan, let it not be today. For a moment, the soul-executing emissary, Shen Wei, wanted nothing more than to pound him into a hash brown. We're going to skirt right past that euphemism. The fury that washed over him made even the black mist surrounding him tremble. Zhao Yunlan found a passably flat rock, took a seat, and drained his cup of coffee. Using his canine teeth, he plucked the cheese slice out of his burger and discarded it. There was no outward sign that he realized he'd made the soul-executing emissary swell into a balloon filled with rage. I might be a 12-year-old boy, but you really can't include imagery with swell in it without me just assuming you're euphemizing. Again. Shen Wei moved to shield him from the wind. What did I tell you? Zhao Yunlan wiped his mouth. Don't agree to anything the Netherworld says and wait for you to come home. Enunciating so crisply that there was a pause between words, Shen Wei said, Then what are you doing here? After a quick look around to be sure they were alone, aside from the black cat, Zhao Yunlan got up and hugged the emissary. It was like embracing an ice sculpture. What's wrong? Are you angry? Daching slightly turned aside to avoid witnessing the train wreck. Shen Wei pushed Zhao Yunlan away. Will nothing satisfy you until I die of anger? Zhao Yunlan took Shen Wei's hand and held it for just a moment before letting go. In a small, sincere voice, he said, When we get back, you can make me kneel on Lego, okay? I really had no choice this time. Just ask Daching. It's all because that brat Chushuja gave the Netherworld leverage over me. Clearly you were the one with leverage against the Netherworld. You used it to force them to remove Chushuja's merit shackles. Besides, I'm already here. Too late for me to go back now. Zhao Yunlan spread his arms. Don't be angry. You know it's bad for you. If anything were to happen to you because you were too angry, you'd break my heart. Shen Wei, Awei, Xiaowei, babe, come on, don't ignore me. Say something. No, stop. I say a particular string of bullshit like that all the time. Sweetie, baby, sugar, honey. Listen. I said I loved characters like Zhao Yunlan. I didn't say I had nothing in common with them. Daching shuddered as if he'd pulled a muscle. Unable to bear hearing another word, he took a few steps further away. Zhao Yunlan was just about to lean in shamelessly when he suddenly sensed something. He immediately backed up several paces just as the magistrate, Oxhead, Horseface, and the Heibai Wuchang arrived with a group of reapers. I mean, at least he's aware of the room. Trailing behind them was another large group, although it wasn't clear who exactly they were. This second group seemed to include Yao and humans, and a few even had the auspicious aura of Buddhist enlightenment. Did I miss a... Hang on, I think I missed a footnote somewhere. Oh, yeah, for, Oxhead, Horseface, and the Heibai Wuchang. Along with the Heibai Wuchang pair, Oxhead and Horseface are mythological beings who bring dead souls to the Netherworld. They are often paired as guards of the Netherworld gates. Thank you. He and the soul-executing emissary stood to either side of the people approaching. The emissary was shrouded within his customary black mist, and Zhao Yunlan wore no expression at all. His face was a little pale, perhaps due to the cold or the high elevation. Even his lips were devoid of color. As he gazed at the new arrivals, his brow seemed to furrow slightly before he gave a dispassionate nod. Something seemed off between the two of them, but no one could put a finger on why. Having the soul-executing emissary see Zhao Yunlan alone first had very much been part of the magistrate's plan. If they were already at the foot of Kunlun Mountain, the emissary would never allow Zhao Yunlan to head back alone, leaving him no choice but to take Zhao Yunlan up the mountain with them. After all, that was his beloved. Even if the emissary were entertaining notions of defecting, Zhao Yunlan's presence would give him second thoughts. The emissary certainly wouldn't dare take action with him there. But by orchestrating this, the Netherworld had jabbed at the emissary's tender underbelly, putting themselves solidly in his bad books. The magistrate anxiously studied the emissary's silhouette through the thick black mist, unsure if he had made the right move. Magistrate sounded like a weighty title, but he served at the pleasure of the 10 kings of the Yenlo courts. By the time matters fell in his lap, he didn't have all that much power. The magistrate himself sometimes felt like his real job was to serve as a scapegoat. The magistrate gave a dry laugh. The guardian arrived so early. He then turned toward the emissary, hands clasped, and bowed down nearly to the ground. With the greatest politeness, he began, "This lowly one." But before he finished bowing, the emissary had already turned and begun walking up the mountain. Cold, suitably cold, characteristically cold. Withholding even the most basic of courtesies was a clear sign that he was furious. The magistrate didn't dare object. He could only laugh awkwardly and call the crowd to keep up. The sky grew darker as they walked. Lightning and wind crashed together in the heavens. Looking up, one could glimpse a shape like that of a black dragon flickering in and out of sight. Kunlun Mountain, which, by the way, that gives me anxiety. Does that give anybody else anxiety? I skated over the last mention of the black dragon. But, I should really tell my wife about this because I'm the DM for a D&D group that includes the wife and some friends. And they're currently doing a favor for the black dragon that they've pissed off so badly that after the favor, the black dragon's still going to kill them. So this might be what I have coming. Kunlun Mountain was sealed by ice year-round. It was as tall as thousands of men, majestic and craggy, and reached up into the very clouds. Here there were 1,000 mountains among which no birds flew, and 10,000 trails with no sign of human passage. Footnote, from the poem River Snow by the Tang Dynasty poet Lu Zongyuan. Zhao Yunlan had never been to Kunlun Mountain before. It had never crossed his mind that he could have any sort of connection with this great snowy mountain. But after the long journey, and the first moment he set foot on Kunlun, he fully and abruptly understood what it meant to be bound by blood. It was a profoundly peculiar feeling, as though a data cable had reached into the depths of his very soul and connected him to this mountain range. For a brief instant, everything else left Zhao Yunlan's mind. He forgot all the complicated scheming and plotting in his mind, the mishmash of beings around him, and even Shen Wei, who was still angry. Moving almost purely on instinct, he walked forward. The original soul-guarding order, pressed against his chest, felt searingly hot. As they continued up the mountain, Da Qing, perched on Zhao Yunlan's shoulders, became increasingly nervous, as if he felt something. Guardian? Guardian? Startled, Zhao Yunlan came back to himself to find the magistrate tugging on him. It turned out they had reached a flat path of ground covered in unbroken, pristine new snow. To one side were huge rocks as tall as a person, arranged into hexagrams in an 8x8 grid. Small vortexes intermittently blew through the formation, giving it a tranquil, almost solemn atmosphere. With some reservation, the magistrate said, "Past here is the Kunlun Mountain Pass. My apologies, but we must trouble the guardian to take us up there." Shen Wei's face was hidden, but the weight of his gaze was palpable. However, when Zhao Yunlan tried to meet his eyes, Shen Wei feigned aloofness and turned away. Zhao Yunlan smiled bitterly and gave Da Qing's butt a pat, signaling him to get down. Pulling out the soul-guarding order, he walked to the center of the giant rocks. The watching crowd couldn't help holding their breaths as Zhao Yunlan took those steps. The moment he reached the center of the rock formation, the harsh wind died down to nothing. The trail of footprints he left behind him seemed lonely, yet peaceful. He stood still in the center and closed his eyes, revealing a profile as quiet as the deepest currents. Listening carefully, he heard an echo coming from the 10,000 great mountains. That echo was verse. North of the crimson waters, earth and sky do meet, 90,000 slopes on which immortals hold their seat. From lofty peaks that brush the clouds, all creation lies below. Here was born the universe, where mountains stand and rivers flow. Kunlun is its name. Without a word of instruction from anyone, Zhao Yunlan knew exactly what to do. Something akin to a voice in his heart guided him. His eyes snapped open. Wherever he looked, the giant rocks turned in response, obediently rearranging themselves, as mystifying as the path of the stars. It was an overwhelming sight. In Shenwei's eyes, there was only one person in the world. We're aware, but still. As Zhao Yunlan stood there in his mismatched windbreaker and boots, his short hair whipped into a snarled bird's nest by the wind, another silhouette overlaid him in Shenwei's vision, that of a man whose green robe brushed the ground, an image from impossibly long ago. He was unable to contain himself a moment longer. Black mist rose from his sleeve and enveloped Zhao Yunlan, cutting him off from everyone else's view. He was for Shenwei's eyes only, as though they were the only people left in the world. Shenwei laughed bitterly at himself. Thousands of years ago, he would have gladly died in exchange for one more look from that man, and yet, at the same time, he'd felt himself unworthy of sullying those eyes. But now his greed was bottomless. There's a joke in there somewhere. He wanted nothing less than to be his beloved's one and only, and to be the only one who could so much as lay eyes on him. All without him realizing it, the seed planted in his heart millennia ago had blossomed into a demon, one from which he couldn't break free. Hold the fuck on, I'm writing down a page number. Volume 2. 254, by the way. Shenwei had been fighting both nature and instinct for all he was worth since the day he entered the world. Yet in the end, a single unexpected meeting had been enough to be his undoing. The earth began to shake. A distant roar came from atop Kunlun Mountain. Then the thick layer of clouds was torn asunder by a flash of divine lightning that struck the ground with all its devastating force. Atop the mountain, a strange mask flickered in and out of sight, as though Ghostface was standing above them, looking down with eyes of ice. The massive rock pillars toppled with a tremendous boom. Everyone present was instantaneously transported to the peak of Kunlun Mountain, the forbidden place of the gods. Before they could find their footing, the black cat let out a howl. Following his gaze, they all saw the great divine tree. It was as old as the very earth and sky, and its gnarled branches were half withered. Not a single leaf grew, not a single blossom remained. Its aura was one of death. The black cat struggled out of Zhao Yunlan's arms. The instant his paws hit the ground, his body shifted and elongated, taking human form! Zhao Yunlan, having never had even an inkling that Da Qing could transform, stood dumbfounded for a moment. He's here! I'm okay. The person before him had long hair as black as a raven's wing, pulled back in a ponytail, and gem-like feline eyes. Da Qing stared at the half-withered tree, eyes reddening with emotion, and spat, "Who dares make trouble atop Kunlun Mountain?" A much different vibe from the show, I must say. It was getting to where I was like, is Da Qing gonna transform? Are we gonna get to see that anytime soon? Or is that just like a thing in the show? I was starting to think that, but here we are. In response, innumerous Yochu surged up from the ground as if born out of the ancient tree's roots. A fierce wind rose in the next moment. Woo! Oh, Gesundheit. I'm too excited. Evidently. A fierce wind rose in the next moment, and Ghostface's giant head appeared in the thick layers of clouds, spanning thousands of meters and blocking out the sun. An eerie smile adorned his face. His mountain-sized limbs and torso drifted in and out of view among the ever-present clouds and mist atop the mountain. Forming a symbol with one hand, he reached behind himself with the other. A cauldron dozens of stories tall floated up into the air behind them. It spun furiously, generating a wind so loud and ferocious that it was painful to hear. Oh, Art! Art of the boy! Oh my god! Hang on. There was a shocked cry. Soul Tempering Cauldron. The Soul Tempering Cauldron. That's a name. Ghostface reached out again with the same hand, now holding a huge axe. He swung it mercilessly downward. Someone harshly shoved Zhao Yunlan to the side. The fierce wind, reeking with blood, blew into his eyes. He was unable to force them open. As a great clang rang out, everyone turned to look and saw that the mountain of an axe had been stopped in its descent by a thick blade, 3 chi and 3 kun long. Below the axe, the soul-executing emissary was like an ant holding up a behemoth. Fierce wind ripped at his sleeves, revealing slender, pale hands. There came a small crack as the emissary twisted his wrist, and a corner of the huge axe chipped off. Then, as he turned to the side, another sharp clang sounded. The axe was driven a meter up in the air, and a thin crack started to spread from the chip through the rest of the weapon. It hit the ground with such force that a gigantic 100-meter chasm opened at the peak of the snowy mountain. Countless Yochu died under their master's axe before they could even crawl out of the earth. The Soul Tempering Cauldron, the emissary said quietly. You're crazy. I'm not crazy. You've already taken the mountain river all, so you can have it. Sooner or later, you'll come to me with it. But the merit brush will be mine no matter what, and once 2 of the 4 pillars are broken, and half the sky is overturned, nothing in the world will be able to stop me. Ghostface's dark, heavy gaze swept around. Why did you bring such an odd bunch with you? Were they afraid you'd jump ship on the spot? Oh, no, that's not the right window. Look at that. Focus. Thank you. Look at it. It's, I'm so fucking excited. Okay. Everything's happening all at once. It's everything everywhere all at once. There was an indiscriminate attack. A slap delivered to almost everyone present in one fell swoop. Ghostface's gaze landed on Zhao Yunlan. Somehow, the smile on his face grew even creepier. Oh, I see the Guardian is here too. No wonder. Da Qing's face went cold, but he only managed a single step before Zhao Yunlan grabbed him by the hair and yanked him back. I don't know why I think I can drink anything. Holding Da Qing's ponytail in one hand, Zhao Yunlan dug out a cigarette with the other. Da Qing might have been in human shape, but he still had the instincts of a cat. Having his hair pulled made him turn and swipe at Zhao Yunlan, but since he no longer had claws, it only left a faint white mark. He realized Zhao Yunlan's hands were as cold as ice. Don't make things worse, you damn fatty. Zhao Yunlan rolled the cigarette between his fingers, voice below even a whisper. He confided, I'm a little nervous. Da Qing's eyes widened. Zhao Yunlan glanced to one side. The Crow tribes there behind the netherworld. The rest of the Yao form one family, and then there are the Arhats of the West. Who are those people over there? Taoists? When the earth-shattering axe had made its descent, the crowd had automatically split into groups. They're either well-respected or they've ascended to godhood, Da Qing said, but not a single one of them has the right to interfere in a battle between these two. If you hadn't brought them, they wouldn't even have been able to get up here. Other than these two, the only one I've seen who dared cause such a commotion here was a woman with a snake tail. The one with a human face and snake body, one of the 3 sovereigns, Nua. Snow began drifting down from the darkened sky. The hideous Yochu opposite the denizens of the netherworld. The tension between the two groups was ready to erupt at any moment. Da Qing turned to avoid looking at the great divine tree, forcing himself to calm down, and told Zhao Yunlan, You'd better back up a little. The snow had extinguished Zhao Yunlan's cigarette. He pulled out a napkin, carefully wrapped the cigarette butt and ashes in it, and stuffed it all back into his pocket. Very environmentally conscientious. He backed up outside the field of battle, circled around everyone else to the great divine tree, and placed a hand on its icy, withered trunk. No one knew how tall the great divine tree was, but the exposed roots alone were level with Zhao Yunlan's chest. It was like a god entrenched in this place. I don't know anything, he thought. But you know me, don't you? As he thought those words, something brushed his fingers. Zhao Yunlan froze, then realized that a tiny, vivid green leaf had sprouted from the great divine tree's trunk right between his fingers. It slowly grew into a stalk as thin as a strand of hair and curled gently around his finger. Zhao Yunlan smiled in surprise and felt for his lightweight hiking bag. Just then, Ghostface reached out. The massive soul-tempering cauldron appeared between his huge palms, which seemed as if they could cover the sky. In stark contrast to his deathly pale fingers, wisp after wisp of black gas was surging within the cauldron. "The ancient merit tree! The body that is dead, but not yet born," said Ghostface. "Does the Guardian know what exactly the merit brush is?" I just brushed the mic. Zhao Yunlan turned and leaned back against the great divine tree, looking up at Ghostface from a distance. "Why don't you tell me?" "Before the Flame and Yellow Emperors famously fought with Chiyo, the gods were already embattled. 2 sovereigns, Fuxi and Nua, ascended Kunlun Mountain and asked for a branch from the great divine tree with which to create order. Nua, resentful that she had created humans out of mud contaminated by the 3 worms, acted on her own. She thrust the branch from the great divine tree into the place of great disrespect. Silence! The soul-executing emissary's shout tore the air. The soul-executing blade in his hand extended, as limitless as the Monkey King's staff from legends of old. While the hilt remained less than too soon, and thus possible to hold, it bore enormous weight, and the blade's tip seemed to reach the very edge of the sky, stirring the wind and thunderclouds together. There came a loud whoosh as a bolt of lightning lanced downward, as if the very sky had been pierced. Divine thunder flew straight toward the crown of Ghostface's head. Ghostface only laughed. Tilting his head back, he caught the heavenly thunder in his mouth and swallowed it whole. The soul-executing blade followed immediately in its wake, slicing first through the cauldron in Ghostface's hands, before ripping through all the way up to his chest. Wherever the blade cut, razor-sharp wind rose up. Fist-sized shards of ice flew everywhere. Hordes of Yochu rushed forward and began indiscriminately attacking the crowd on the mountaintop amid all the flying sand and rock. Meanwhile, Zhao Yunlan sat on the swollen roots of the great divine tree. He had no place in the chaotic battle, and he finally understood the emissary's awkward position. Ghostface didn't see him as an enemy, but no one here saw him as an ally either. The emissary and Ghostface were unleashing their true capabilities now. Back under the mountain river if Ghostface hadn't shown mercy, things definitely wouldn't have ended so easily. Ghostface hadn't seemed to want to fight the emissary seriously at the time. "The place of great disrespect," Zhao Yunlan murmured to himself. In those few sentences, Ghostface had given clear answers to the questions Zhao Yunlan had been turning over in his mind. Legend said that all people have 3 worms: greed, wrath, and delusion. In Record of Ancient Secrets, it said the 3 worms came from the dirt. By extension, the place of great disrespect might very well be the origin of the so-called 3 worms. Ghostface soared up into the sky, evading the soul-executing blade. When he landed, the entire mountain trembled along with him. He showed no sign of shutting up. "The divine tree is merciful. It withers first, then grows roots. That branch grew into the legendary ancient merit tree after the battle between the Flame and Yellow Emperors and Chiyo." "Shut up!" The soul-executing blade slashed toward him horizontally. Zhao Yunlan could barely even see where Shenwei was, much less imagine how he could so easily wield a blade that was nearly 100 meters long. The blade followed Ghostface's every move. His voice was once again cut off as his body suddenly shrank down. Just as it reached half of its previous size, the blade swept across the top of his head, barely clearing it. The soul-tempering cauldron hit the ground with a deafening boom. Another endless wave of Yochu began to appear around the cauldron, but Ghostface had disappeared. Zhao Yunlan watched impassively, not turning around even when he felt someone approach from behind. But Da Qing wasn't so calm. He sprang down from the tree, holding a short, palm-sized knife that had been hidden in his hand like feline claws. Phantom-like, he flung himself at the approaching person. Ghostface raised a hand and took the attack. There was a soft clang as Da Qing's blade ricocheted off. Was his wrist made of iron? Ghostface made a grab for Da Ching's neck, but even after transforming, Da Ching was still impossibly nimble. 2 quick backflips, and he was back up in the divine tree's branches, fixing him with a hostile glare. Before trying to hit a cat, you should check to see who its owner is. Zhao Yunlan slowly turned to look at Ghostface. His smile faded, leaving only a steady gaze. You only managed to sneak your way to the peak of Kunlun Mountain thanks to my soul fire. Did you really think this was your territory? Those words seemed to hit harder than either lightning or thunder. Ghostface stopped dead in his tracks. Woo, as I hit the mic again. Aggression seemingly forgotten. He hung back a good 3 meters away, not daring to take another step. Shen Wei, who had come rushing over, was equally unprepared to hear those words. He too stood immobilized. After the battle between the Flame and Yellow Emperors and Chiyo, the 3 sovereigns couldn't bear to see any more suffering. After seeking guidance from the heavens, they carved a merit brush from the ancient merit tree. Everything has a spirit, and the merit brush records all the merits and sins, rights and wrongs for those living spirits, Zhao Yunlan said evenly. Later, the merit brush became one of the 4 hallowed artifacts. When Nua repaired the sky, it was used to seal the 4 pillars of heaven. The reincarnation dial fell to the mortal realm. The mountain river all landed below the earth, and the merit brush... The corner of Zhao Yunlan's mouth curved up as he glanced to the side. The merit brush shattered into countless fragments and fell onto every living being in the world. Isn't that right, Magistrate? From his hiding place behind the great divine tree, the Magistrate slowly came forward and prostrated himself. Voice trembling, he said, "This lowly one has concealed much. I truly had no other choice, Kunlun. Please, let me atone for my crimes." The soul-tempering cauldron started to shake violently, and the entire mountain with it. Behind Zhao Yunlan, countless new buds burst into life on the great divine tree. The dead branches rustled as sparse, tiny flowers formed. The man leaning casually against the trunk of the tree said, "Since the merit brush belongs to me, Kunlun, why don't you return it to its rightful owner?" The face on the ghost mask twisted involuntarily. Zhao Yunlan spared him a glance. "You don't need to act all mysterious with me. I know what you look like." Feeling Shen Wei stiffen, Zhao Yunlan dropped his voice as though explaining, "All forms are illusory. Do you really think I can't tell 2 different people apart?" Before the emissary could open his mouth, a huge wind picked up on the peak of Kunlun Mountain, even fiercer than it did during the battle between the emissary and Ghostface. It nearly blew Da Ching straight out of the tree. He promptly transformed back into his cat form, claws digging into the tree for purchase. Zhao Yunlan, leaning against the tree, avoided being buffeted about, but nobody else was so lucky. The Magistrate fell on his face. Dozens of Yochu were flung up into the vortex of wind. The beings who had taken to the air fell to the ground, rolling with the force of the impact. Within the vortex, the outline of a massive brush faded in and out of view. The merit brush. The soul-tempering cauldron disintegrated entirely, and the merit brush once again appeared in the mortal realm. Zhao Yunlan, Shen Wei, and Ghostface held each other in check. For a time, no one moved. Ghostface spoke first. "Since the mountain god is so sure that he'll have the merit brush sooner or later, why don't you go ahead?" Though he could barely stand upright against the fierce wind, Zhao Yunlan successfully maintained his pose like a wise master. Perhaps someone's waiting to reap the benefits without doing any work. "I'm already dead, come on!" The Magistrate, who had a huge lump on his head, didn't dare make a sound. Ghostface sighed. "We are indebted to the mountain god for the use of your soul fire. I really wish it didn't have to be this way." And then he whistled. Hundreds of Yochu burst from beneath the ground and surrounded them. The emissary immediately took up a position beside Zhao Yunlan, hands on the hilt of his blade. In the next moment, the merit brush started to rapidly shrink and came flying straight toward the great divine tree. Before anyone could react, it flew right into the tree. Everyone was caught off guard. Ghostface flung out a sleeve and sent the magistrate flying, then began to reach into the great divine tree, only to have his hand blocked by Zhao Yunlan. Ghostface's arm was hard and cold. Zhao Yunlan felt as though he'd slammed his wrist against a rock. He didn't need to pull his sleeve back and check to know it was going to bruise. Fortunately, Ghostface didn't dare fight him head on. He slipped past Zhao Yunlan and thrust his claws into the great divine tree, but was rewarded only with a sharp, grating noise that could set anyone's teeth on edge. Ghostface's hand was mercilessly forced back out of the tree. 2 of his metal-hard nails had snapped off entirely. Ignoring the pain in his wrist, Zhao Yunlan feigned a lack of surprise. All smiles, he said, "I tried to stop you so you wouldn't get hurt, but you really don't know what's good for you, huh?" Ghostface ground his teeth hard enough for all to hear. He spun away, transformed into a swirl of black mist, and disappeared. He didn't bother to take the Yo-Chu, who were still heading for Zhao Yunlan. Every one of them was cut down by the soul-executing blade without getting within a meter of Zhao Yunlan. Zhao Yunlan sighed in relief and tentatively touched the great divine tree. Some sort of gravitational pull was trying to draw him inside. The hood of Shenwei's cloak had fallen back in the fierce gale when the merit brush first appeared. Not much of the black mist remained around him, revealing glimpses of the face Zhao Yunlan knew. His expression was complicated, hopeful and worried, with a hint of cautious nervousness. "Do you remember everything?" Shaking his wrist, Zhao Yunlan winced. "Remember what? I just guessed and made up more bullshit as I went. What is that brat made of? Why is he so hard?" Shenwei didn't know how to respond. "Help me stop them. I think the great divine tree is calling to me," Zhao Yunlan said. He began climbing into the tree. Once he was halfway in, a thought occurred to him. Turning back, he said to Shenwei, "Whoever gets home first, remember to leave the door unlocked and the lights on. Love you." With that, he disappeared into the great divine tree. Fucking... It's awkward to slip, but get... Ah! That's it. That's it. That's it. That's it. It's fucking great that we are at a reasonable time to stop because I can't handle this guy anymore. All right? We're on page 267 for chapter 18. We are bang on for the pages we had to get done today. We're going to finish this next Tuesday because I got to take a week to walk that off. Ah! No. No. No, no, no. Anyway, no stream on Thursday. We come back on Tuesday. I have a rather annoying doctor's appointment on Thursday, so we will finish this volume, and I'm reasonably certain. Let me do book math real quick. 2, 7, Yeah. It's perfectly reasonable that we are going to finish it on Tuesday. Well, we finally know Da Qing transforms. We also, encountered a couple other things in that chapter, but one of them was Da Qing transforms. And this, I'm so happy about that. I was hoping that they kept that from the show, that it was original, that it happened in the book, and they just put it on the show. So there's that, despite a couple other things that happened. Maybe. I'm going to go walk that man off. All right. I will be back next Tuesday. I hope you guys had a good time. This was kind of a banger of a stream. Those were 2 really good chapters to have back to back. That was kind of a quintessential experience for a stream. I will see you guys next Tuesday. Please, for the love of God, take care of yourselves. Even and especially now. Please do that for me personally, and we will finish this next week, okay? I love you very, very, very fucking much. All right? And I will see you on Tuesday.